All right, so this video is going to be a Sigil Stone tier list for the Oblivion remaster. I made one of these for Classic Oblivion, but some things have changed, so I'm going to make a new one for the remaster. And I'm not going to actually be ranking each separate Sigil Stone, but each simplified effect. So just the effects only, because it gets too complicated when you're talking about the combination of every two effects. So I'm just going to go through each effect and talk about them, and we will rank them. So very first, we have Absorb Agility. And the problem with the Absorb, and we're going to just put an F right now. F is the one, if I ever see them in my playthroughs, I'm going to save scum, do a quick save, quick load, because they are annoying. I actually try to avoid doing that typically because it's nice to have a feeling of RNG for loot, but the fact that these are in the game can be kind of annoying. So Absorb Agility means you're going to fortify your agility by 25 points when you hit an enemy, and it's going to last for 30 seconds. So if we go to this Absorb Agility, 30 seconds, it says it right there. This 30 it means that there are 30 charges. So you're taking 25 agility. It costs 175 Magicka per swing. So it takes over 3 grand soul gems to recharge this Absorb Agility, and it drains your opponent's agility by 25, which against NPCs and monsters actually doesn't do anything. So this is just 25 agility. If you were curious what agility does, well, it's going to give you fatigue. So 20 agility is going to give me equals 20 times that number. So, oops, sorry, it's 25 fatigue. 33 max fatigue. It's going to increase my regen by this number times 25. So every second I'm going to get about 3 more fatigue per second. And that's my weapon enchant. And you're going to need to use Grand Soul Gems consistently to recharge it. Because yes, it lasts 30 seconds, but every attack it refreshes. And it doesn't work on a bow. So this would have to be an offhand item that you switch to. Remember, at 100 agility, this is doing nothing for you. So you could say at low levels, maybe it's worthwhile, but at low levels, you really need damage on your weapon or weakness. Gaining a little bit more agility so your short sword does 1 more damage is not worth your time. I would never, ever use Absorb Agility. The same goes for Absorb Endurance. In fact, Absorb Endurance doesn't do anything but give you health. It gives you 25 health because you've absorbed the 25 endurance. That is it. It does not lower their health. Draining their endurance doesn't do anything. Damaging their endurance doesn't do anything. Do not waste your time. Stats like endurance for NPCs determine their starting health, but if you drain or damage or absorb their endurance, it doesn't hurt them. It doesn't work the same way it does against you. And here I'll show that. All right, we're going to be testing out damage and drain, strength and endurance. So first, I kill him in 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. So that is out without using any special things. Now, if I use these spells, Drain Endurance and Damage Endurance, combined with Drain and Damage Strength. So this is going to completely remove all of his strength and his endurance. So this is my 1 and 2 spell. So here's the damage one. Here's the, oops, did I miss? Let's try again. The drain one, so he should have drain and damage. You should have absolutely no strength or endurance left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, he healed himself with a potion. But as you can see, there's no difference. That didn't do anything. It didn't make him die faster. Next, we have Fortify Agility. Now, Fortify Agility, at least, if we find it here, this is an armor one, at low levels could be worthwhile, but if you are able to get a custom spell to Fortify Blade, if you're using short blades, or Fortify Marksman, it's just going to be way more damage. And that's because point for point, Blade is a lot more valuable, or Marksman skill. It doesn't matter which one we're actually talking about. If I have a base weapon damage of 18 with 50 agility and 50 blade, I'll be doing about 8.5 damage per swing. Gaining 10 agility isn't even getting me past 9. But if you gain 10 weapon skill, it's going to get me to almost 10 damage. Each point of blade is about 3 times as effective for damage as each point of agility. The same goes for marksman. The same goes for comparing weapon skills like blunt and blade to strength. Attributes like strength and agility have the same multipliers. They function the same way. Skills like blunt, blade, and marksman function the same way in how they affect your damage. Skills are valuable. Attributes, they have value. You want to use them, but you should not be fortifying them. It's just not worth your time. So Fortify Agility, I guess it has a purpose. You could use it. There's just a lot better options, and so I would say it's at the very bottom. Next, we have Absorb Fatigue. This one can actually be pretty useful. Every hit, you're taking 50 fatigue from your opponent. And as you might know, when opponents run out of fatigue, they fall over, and that can be really useful. This will also keep your fatigue really high, so you'll always be able to just keep swinging, keep blocking, do whatever you need to do. Not a bad idea to keep this as an offhand weapon. When you're outnumbered, switch to this until somebody knocks down. It'll keep your fatigue up, and then you can go back to focusing one person down. Still not great in my opinion, and so I'm actually going to put it as C, just because knocking people down is great, but this is a lot of charge. 89 charge per swing. Remember, a Grand Soul Gem recharges 1,600. That's a lot of charge just to be damaging fatigue and restoring your own fatigue. Next, we have Fortify Fatigue, 50 points. Sadly, this is not like it was in Classic Oblivion. In Classic Oblivion, maximizing your fatigue actually improved your weapon damage. I deleted that from this formula, but if I go to this one here, fatigue at 100% gave you a 1 times damage multiplier. And if you could double your fatigue, it gave you 50% increased damage. So as a pure melee or physical focused character, Fortify Fatigue was the only way to improve your damage beyond 100 skill and 100 attribute. Now this just means you can block more, you can run more, you can jump more, which is useful, but even increasing athletics and acrobatics in the block skill more will have more value, more bang for your buck when you get those perks than Fortify Fatigue. It's not terrible, again, so it's going to go in C tier. I just don't really see the point. You know, your enchants, the goal should really be to either improve your convenience, improve your damage, or your survivability. And this one doesn't really do any of those. There's a little bit of convenience there, but it's just not a big enough number to make a big difference. Fortify Fatigue is a very cheap spell. You could just cast 100 of it for not that much Magicka, especially if you have a high restoration whenever you want. And you could add that onto all your spells if you really want to have a lot of fatigue. Next, we have Absorb Health. So this does 25 points of damage and heals you for 25. Unlike elemental damage enchants, though, this does not stack with weakness to elements. It does stack with weakness to magic, but if you use weakness to fire, weakness to frost, or shock, this doesn't do anything. And so that makes it very weak because you can't quadruple it with a combination of weakness to fire and weakness to magic. And on higher difficulties, and this is actually why it's moving to C tier, in Classic Oblivion, you mostly played on default difficulty. The normal person would play on that because it was hard enough. But in the remaster, I think Expert's probably the best difficulty, and a lot of people are interested in playing Master. Absorb Health on Master, not only is it only going to deal 4.25 damage, it's also only going to heal you 4.25. So the healing is reduced, which dramatically reduces the value of Absorb Health. You really got to be doing more damage. It's just not enough. You won't even notice the healing. So Absorb Health, if you're playing on Adept, I'd probably move up to B, maybe even A, because you don't need that much damage. But if you're playing on Expert, which I think is my favorite difficulty, this moves down to the C tier. Fortify Intelligence, late game, I would say it's F. It's 24 Magicka. It's the same as a Grand Soul Gem. This is the highest level of the Sigil Stone. If you see this early game, it's even worse. It's much better to get Fortify Magicka. The only time this is better, at the very beginning of the game, if you get a Fortify Magicka Sigil Stone, it's 10, where the lowest level intelligence would be 14 Magicka, because every intelligence is worth 2. After that, though, by late game, this is 24 Magicka. A Fortify Magicka Sigil Stone is more than double the effectiveness. So while Fortify Intelligence isn't terrible, just the fact that there's something so much better than it pushes it up a tier. And you know what? I think we're going to have to add one more tier. So we're going to add a row below, and we're going to call this D, because this is going to get too crowded too quickly, just so I can differentiate a little bit more. These are still going to stay in the C tier. All right, we're just going in order as they come. Next, we have Fortify Health. Fortify Health gives you 30 health, obviously. However, it's just not a lot of health. If you wanted to fortify your health by only 30 for a minute, you could tack that on to any of your spells, and at a high skill, a high restoration, that's only going to cost you 13 Magicka. At 50, it goes up to 50 Magicka, so maybe you're thinking this health is worth it. But remember how effective health works. Getting your armor up to the armor cap and getting your resistances higher does so much more for you than 30 health. It can double your health. Going from 70% armor to 85% armor doubles your physical effective health, because you go from taking 30% damage to 15% damage. So using shield or elemental shields is so much more valuable than Fortify Health at pretty much any stage of the game. 30 is just not enough health to make a big difference. Because of that, this is going in C tier as well. Absorb Magicka, very niche. You could use this build. I've seen it done before with Atronachs, but it can't be used with the bow because it's absorbed. I've personally never done this. I think you would just use a spell as an Atronach, because you have to fortify. You have to make sure the enemy has Magicka, and some enemies just don't. Zivali do, Spider Daedra do. If you know which ones do and you have like perfect knowledge in the game, Absorb Magicka can have some purpose. Am I really going to be using my weapon enchant that you have to recharge, which is kind of tedious, to just get a little bit of Magicka back? That brings us to Absorb Intelligence. So you'd hit somebody, it would increase your Magicka by 50 and then last 30 seconds. This is just terrible. That Magicka goes away. You get one weapon enchant. So I'm a lot stricter with the weapon enchants than I am with, like, this gives me 24 Magicka. That could be on a ring, that could be on my boots, whatever. You get one weapon enchant. And if you want to carry an offhand weapon, it's going to weigh something. And it's going to be in your inventory. And you're going to have to open up your inventory to switch to it. You're not going to be using 6 different weapon enchants, chances are. And if you are, it'll be very tedious to play. Absorb Intelligence should just never be one of them. Because of that opportunity cost, it's just a ridiculous thing. I would never use Absorb Intelligence. Next, we have Fortify Magicka, and this is at the top. Still, just like in Classic Oblivion, it is king. 50 Magicka is just such a big boost, and compared to what you can enchant from a Grand Soul Gem, it's more than double the amount of Magicka. Grand Soul Gem only gives you 24, and this is 50. It's really nice. It makes a big difference. I would never pass these up. They're very useful. Getting 3 or 4 of these on your gear can make a big difference, allowing you to cast big spells. And that's pretty much everything in Oblivion. Sorry, physical damage dealers. Everything, even for physical damage dealers, you got to be casting weakness to magic to get your bleed damage up or to get your weakness to normal weapons up. So everything in this game beyond adept difficulty revolves around magic and potions. So if it's not improving that, it's not really doing anything. Next we have Feather. I'm going to put that as B tier just because it's 125. It's more than a maximum cast could be. I like to throw this on one item when I have a really, really powerful build just because it's nice to always have perfect amounts of Feather. Even by mid-game, chances are 125 points is enough to remove all of your encumbrance. Maybe you've seen this before, but it's possible if you're wearing a silver mace with full steel armor and you have less than 75 heavy armor skill that makes it weigh half, you would have 117 weight. And that will slow you down more than 30%. So if I had someone with 100 speed, 70 athletics, we'll say even 150 speed. With this level of encumbrance, they're moving at 381.84. You might not know what that means. You probably don't. That's their final run speed, 150 speed, 70 athletics. Compared to a character with 50 speed and 30 athletics, if I remove that encumbrance, I'm moving at a comparable speed. In fact, 65 speed. There we go. 65 speed is more than 150 with no encumbrance. So just using that Feather enchant is enough to do it. Now, Feather is a cheap spell. It has a 0.01 base cost. So if I switch this to Feather, I could say Feather. Even if I only have 50 skill, you could do 100 magnitude for 2 minutes, and it's only costing you 34. It's very cheap. I like to tack it down to all my spells. By the time you get to late game and you get 100 alteration, it's adding less than 9 Magicka. I just throw it on everything, so I always have a ton of Feather. But in that mid-game point, it might be nice to have one enchant, so that's going to earn it a B ranking. Next, we have Absorb Speed, and it falls into the same category as all the other Absorb attributes. It's terrible. It's terrible. This costs 175 Magicka per swing. Every time you hit something, and it doesn't work with bows, so every time you swing, it gives you 25 speed and drains their speed by 25, which is not going to bring them to 0. It's not enough speed for you to notice. We were just looking at the movement formula. If I go from 65 to 90 speed, my movement does go up, and you might sort of notice it, but you're using your weapon enchant to just always have 25 more speed. And maybe you'll do this weird thing where you hit a bunch of different enemies and try and get a bunch of speed. But the problem is with Absorb, it makes a link between the enemy. And if you get too far away, it breaks it. It's not like you can absorb 25 speed with this enchant from 6 different enemies and then zip away with your new crazy movement speed. What chances are you're going to hit one guy and then you're going to switch to another weapon. And for that fight, for 30 seconds, you're going to have 25 more speed. And then you're going to need to be using Grand Soul Gems to recharge it all the time, or Azure Star. Pain in the ass. I would never use Absorb Speed. Fortify Speed, well, it's only 12 speed, but it is 12 speed, so it's not worthless. But again, looking at this movement, 12 speed going from 90 to 102, it's just not that much. It's not changing my final run speed that much, but it could be noticeable getting a couple of those. And Fortifying Speed, Fortify Attribute is a very expensive spell. If I was going to fortify one, it would be Speed because that goes above 100. It's still not great. I'd probably rank it above Fortify Agility because moving fast is fun, and you could argue it is in B tier. But I think if you're able to get Fortify Magicka, you'd get your restoration up to 100 by casting really expensive spells, and then you'd be able to fortify your own speed by more than 12. This one's arguably B tier because having a couple of them could be nice, but I still would almost never use them. So it's either low B or high C tier. Burden, it almost doesn't work. Again, this will refresh it. You're using 228 Magicka, which is more than an eighth of a Grand Soul Gem, to give an enemy 100 burden. So you'd have to stack it with other burden spells to actually make them over encumbered. So you'd be spending hundreds of Magicka, tons of weapon charge that you have to soul trap to recharge to make an enemy not move. There's paralyze in the game, there's damage fatigue, there's other ways to do it that is so much more effective than burden. Burden is something enemies use on you, and that sucks. It sucks to get burdened. It doesn't really affect your enemies very well because they're not carrying very much and you need to get them over the point. Encumbering them with burden, it's just not worth your time. Don't even try it. I just want to quickly show you that burden does not really work. So if I have burden 1, burden 2, so these are 100 points apiece. Yeah, I don't have 100% spell effectiveness, but he can still move. 2, he can still move. So he can still move and come get me. But if I add that drain, strength, and endurance, if I drain his strength, now the burden will stop him from moving. He has no carry weight. He's over encumbered. However, this spell, I'm using console commands. This spell costs 1,218. So you could do this spell for a very short period of time and then use burden for a cheaper spell. It's just not really viable. You could do weakness stacking and then do burden, and that will also stop him from moving. But again, you're spending a lot of resources to make someone not move instead of just killing them. Could be fun, could be quirky. I'm not wasting my weapon enchant on it. Next, we have Fortify Strength. Fortify Strength, 12 points. Well, if we look at our attributes, what does Strength do? It does increase your weapon damage, but that's after 100. It stops increasing your weapon damage. And as I showed you from the weapon damage formula, attributes aren't really increasing your damage by very much. So it's 5 carry weight, so that is 60 carry weight, which isn't bad. And it's 2/3 health per point. So if we said 12, we're going to say equals 12 times this number. That's 8 health. So this is giving me 8 health and 60 carry weight. Not a lot of health, not a lot of carry weight. It's less than half of what Feather is, and it's not changing my encumbrance. Feather lowers your worn weight variable. Strength just increases your max encumbrance. So strength is meh. Damage fatigue. In Classic Oblivion, this wasn't quite as good because damaging your opponent's fatigue, well, they had more fatigue typically, especially at like lower and middle levels. And damaging their fatigue, it just seemed to work different than it does in the remaster. Stamina or fatigue is working very differently in the remaster. So here's what happened when I used damage fatigue at level 21 in the arena against a master opponent. I just put it as a test on this ebony mace. I turned it to master. Oops. So the ebony mace has damage fatigue 60 points on strike. So she has been running around attacking me, but when they're low on fatigue, enemies just fall down. They get up, they get a lot of their fatigue back. Attacking spends fatigue, and it only takes a few attacks to make her fall back down. And you can hit them as they're getting back up. And if you do, well then they just fall right back down. So I think right then they got their fatigue regenerated. And so I can hit her about 4 times, and she falls back down. So she does get one swing in on me. I could block that one every time, probably. If she power attacks, it's probably over for her. So you can see the moment they start getting back up is when their fatigue is regenerating. If you combine this with like a damage fatigue over time, you can just keep enemies on the ground. So obviously this isn't quite as good as damage, but as you can see, she's not doing a lot to me. She's on the ground quite a bit. So there is some use to this enchant. So I think because it's actually pretty effective, I'm going to put it in A. Damage fatigue is a valid enchant. Now this is, you need a way to kill your enemies. So hopefully you're not just damaging fatigue to knock them down. You got to combine it with something, but as a weapon to get them on the ground, maybe as an off weapon, or to knock them down and then to kill them with your spells. There's different ways to do that. So it's not S tier because it's not amazing, but it is pretty cool and interesting. So I think damage fatigue, just for its interesting variable, it goes up to A. Damage health, 30 points. Now that's a lot. The other damage enchants only do 25, but the problem is a Grand Soul Gem will do way more than 30 if you combine different effects. You can do up to 50 by doing 17, 17, and 16 of Fire, Frost, and Shock. And then all of those are affected by weakness to Fire, Frost, and Shock, meaning if you combine all 4 weaknesses, so Fire, Frost, Shock, and Magic on a spell, cast it, and hit them with that custom enchant that's 200 damage per swing, where this is just 30. And I could use one spell of weakness to magic to make it 60. Not that great. It does have 45 charges. The enchant I'm talking about only has 18. So it's not bad. It's just not great. I'm going to put it in B because it's interesting. But it's not enough health to really be something special that you'd use all the time. Absorb Strength. Man, you could argue it's D, I guess. 25 Strength? No, just kidding. All of these are F. Safe scum. Damage Magicka. This is like Silence, but not as good. So this is probably F. You could argue this is D tier because using it, even if they have a way out of silence like a Dispel or something, which most enemies do not, I'd almost never use this. This is terrible. I don't know. Damage Magicka, I just would never use it. It's D or F. I'm not really going to argue about which one it is because it's just terrible. Demoralize. Well, Demoralize, because it's only 50 points. So honestly, I kind of want to talk about Turn Undead here. We're going to move Turn Undead to the top. Turn Undead says level 25 right there. It's 100 points for 30 seconds. So what that means is that even at max level, you could be level 40 fighting the strongest undead enemy in the game, and it will turn them. So Turn Undead, because it's up to level 25, works. Granted, it's pretty niche to use your one enchant that you're going to use on Turn Undead. It seems a little weird, but pretty good on an off weapon. It can help you dominate Undead. Demoralize, though, well, this only works at lower levels, and the problem is, if you get it at lower levels, it's even weaker. So you're getting a level 12 enchant only when you're level 17 or higher. And so Demoralize, I think, is also going to go in the F tier. It just doesn't really work because it's too low level. Fortify Willpower. This got a big boost. Willpower now as an attribute is much better. It gives 8/3. So this 12 for fatigue is going to be this times 12 fatigue. It's 32 fatigue, which whatever, not that much. But it also increases your mana regen, your Magicka regen. And that's really the main reason people would use it. However, Magicka regen is too low in this game until you get into the 300, 400 range. And that requires ramping with spells. If you're not going to ramp with spells, 12 willpower is just not enough to do anything. I don't really see myself using it often because there's just better enchants. You could argue it's bumped up to A. I'm going to say it's B because using like 3 of them, 36 willpower is not bad. That will make a difference, and maybe that will help get your ramp going. It'll boost that ramp even more, and that is a lot of fatigue. It's not as much as 50 fatigue, which I put in C, but the Fortify Fatigue is not doing anything for your Magicka regen. So I think Willpower definitely beats out Fortify Fatigue, but I don't think it's beaten out Fortify Magicka or even close to it. Shield. Shield should probably be A or B because 20 shield is really good. However, again, we're going to have to kind of skip to a different one. You can use Fire Shield, Shock Shield, or Frost Shield, and that does what Shield does, but instead of 20 points, it's 25 points. And it gives you resistance. So for example, Fire Shield will give me 25% fire resistance and 25 points of shield. And that is S tier because that's massive. Just shield by itself is only 20 points of armor. People do say frequently that you can reach the armor cap without any enchants by just wearing armor. That's not true. And I'll prove it with the spreadsheet because that's how I do everything. So people are typically talking about Daedric armor. There is other Madness armor, Perfect Amber, but they're talking about Daedric or Glass. And with the final 100 light armor perk, Glass, the full set, will give you 50 armor plus 50%, so it'd be 75. So it's equivalent to Daedric. But I don't want to have to do that formula, so we're just going to talk about the armor from Daedric. Daedric, as a full set, gives you 75. However, if you're using a two-hander, a staff, or a bow, your shield armor value is not helping you. So you have 75 minus 22.5 from your armor. So we're going to say our base armor is equal to 75 minus 22.5. That's my base armor, 52.5. At 100 armor skill, your multiplier is 1. So at 50 armor skill, that is multiplied by your armor. At 0, that's your multiplier. Obviously, you would never have 0. But assuming you have 100 skill, and that you have, that was for light armor, that multiplier there, and that you have repaired your armor up with the armorer perk to get it to 125% health, that is just a straight bonus of 25%. It's just a multiplier. So my final armor is equal to that base armor times my over repaired armor, which is 65. That's 20 short. So if you're not using a shield, which is very typical for a bow user who might be wearing light armor, but with full glass, this would be the same number, 65.6. So a bow user would not be at the armor cap, a staff user, or any two-handed user. And I realize that two-handed has been very hardly nerfed in this game, in the remaster. In Classic, it was really good. Now it kind of sucks, so I do get most builds are going to use a shield, but it is important you know you're not hitting the armor cap without that shield. And even with the shield, if you're not over repairing your gear, remember this was 75. So at 1.25, when you over repair it, yes, you get to 93, but before you have 75 armor, you're not going to be at the armor cap. And if you have a lower armor skill, like your heavy armor, which does take a while to get to 100, you also won't be at the armor cap. It takes about, what is that, 85 skill? So at about 85 skill, you're still just below the armor cap. And at 80 skill, you're kind of below the armor cap. So it does take, even in full Daedric with high skill, you need that armorer perk and you need your skill to get above 85. So that takes a while to get to, and that's if you're using a shield. A lot of players use a bow or use a staff and will not have a shield. So these sigil stones, shield and elemental shield, are really good. Shield, just because this elemental shield exists and there are 3 possibilities for them, because there are 3 possibilities for them, there's frost shield, fire shield, and shock shield. There's a total of 30 possible sigil stones you can get. With 3 options, that's a 1 in 10 chance, 3 out of 30. You should be finding one. That's going to bump shield down to B. So shield is still really good, and I would put it at A, but just because there's something literally better that's more common, it has to bring shield down. It can't be as good as that. But elemental shield is phenomenal. It also gives you resistances, which is really good at any stage of the game until you've gotten 100% magic resist. And if you want to play a build that doesn't use 100% magic resist, these elemental shields are really nice. So it's very powerful. Disintegrate Armor and Disintegrate Weapon. So I tried testing these around. I tested them in Classic. They pretty much always suck. They're just not very good. Okay, so here we're going to test Disintegrate Armor on Strike. We'll do a quick save. So as you can see, the armor's not going to break or fall off. It's not really going to be noticeable. It's just not really a viable thing to do, at least not as an enchant. And I'm going to die. So we're just going to load. Oops. And we will try Disintegrate Weapon and see how that works out.
This arena alive!
So it's still, she hasn't quite dropped her weapon yet. Maybe blocking a bit. See if I have some potions.
Let's get this over with.
So even with using console commands to give myself a bunch of health, this enchant isn't doing enough by itself, so I would need to combine it with spells just to remove their weapon. And it's already, the enchantment's pretty much already gone, and she still hasn't dropped her weapon, which is just, it's just not enough. And, you know, staves, like the liches have staves, they have a little bit more charge, but it's just not a feasible thing to do. I would never use this enchant in any realistic build. You know, maybe you can make it work, but I've never been able to do that. And the problem is the base cost is 6.2. So if I want to damage a weapon or armor, they both cost 6.2. 100 for 2 seconds. Even at max skill as a touch spell, that costs 90 Magicka to deal 200 damage. This Daedric armor, this cuirass, has 2,700 health. I'm just not going to kill that. It has way too much health. A glass mace has 480 health. So that is killable. It's possible to destroy these items, but at high levels, weapons and armor just have a lot of health. A glass longsword is 480. So 9 swings with this will not break a glass longsword. It has 30 charges, and for whatever reason, it doesn't look like it's actually making them drop it. It actually makes them break anything. I don't fully understand how it functions, to be honest. It looks like they didn't work, and because of that, I'm going to put them both in F. I'll put Disintegrate Weapon in D, because if you can make it function, maybe you have to combine it with a spell. It can be pretty good against liches, but seriously, you have Turn Undead that you can use against liches, because those staffs can be kind of nuts. When enemies have staffs and they blow you up with them, it does suck. So there is some purpose to it, but it's not good. And I certainly wouldn't be using Disintegrate Armor ever. Fortify Blunt, that's the same as Fortify Blade. Did I already do that one? There it is. I hadn't done it. Well, 12 points. Well, this could be B. It's far better than Strength and Agility. You know what? Honestly, I'm going to put it to B. The problem with these Sigil Stones is that if you are at 100, Blade and Blunt don't do anything. And this late in the game, by level 17, when they're going to be this good, when they're better than a Grand Soul Gem, because a Grand Soul Gem will give you 10 points, I don't really see myself needing them anymore. So I almost never use these Sigil Stones in any build I've ever done. But if you happen to get one at a lower level, Fortify Blunt and Blade, like if you get one at this level, Latent 9, that's a free enchant. So you could use it, but you could also just use a Sigil Stone. So it's like saving you gold, I guess. It has some purpose, but I feel like putting them at B is kind of a high ranking. So a low B, maybe a high C. Dispel. Dispel is interesting. The way it works is it does 5 times the magnitude and it will dispel that level of Magicka worth of spells. So this can dispel up to 600 magnitude worth of stuff. The problem is very few of your opponents will buff themselves with spells that are dispellable. There is the Daedroth, which is one of the easiest opponents in my opinion in this game. They'll put a shield on themselves. This will dispel it. Scamps will cast reflect damage. Some Dremora will cast spells on themselves. This will remove that stuff, except really for summons. That does seem actually really valuable. Summons can be annoying. Zivali will summon those Clan Fear, and this could just one-shot them. So that's actually really good. I'm never really that bothered by invisibility, but it would dispel the invisibility. Bound armor and bound weapons that like the Mythic Dawn use is never a big deal. I said scamps have reflect damage. They have reflect spell. Clan Fear reflect damage, but I don't think they cast it. I think it's just innate on them, so this wouldn't dispel that. Still, there's a lot of things it doesn't work on. If I scroll up in this UESP, there's a lot of things that are greater powers or lesser powers, like the Spriggan's Curse, or I think what the Will-O-Wisp do. If it has immunity to silence, like a greater power or a lesser power, it has immunity to dispel. So dispel does have a lot of limited uses here. It's still so niche, I just don't really see it being effective. But because it's so much dispel, I'll say that bumps it up to C because it can be used. It can be pretty valuable. Next, we have Spell Absorption. If you're an Atronach, this is the one you're looking for. And just because that's so valuable for a very specific build, I'm going to say that's A. It's not S because typically you should be going for Resist Magic because that will protect you from more things like reflected spells. But before you have 100% Resist Magic, or if you want to cap yourself like Skyrim does, I like to cap myself at 80% Resist Magic sometimes. Getting some spell absorption to augment that is another way to increase your defenses. It's pretty good, and it is really nice to get Magicka back from traps and other things when they shoot you. It feels good. Next, we have elemental damage, and this one I think I'm also going to put an A, not because it's a good enchant, because honestly they're not, but they have 70 charges, and that is such a convenience boost. 70 charges last so long. Unlike a Grand Soul Gem that did 25, that would have less than half the charges, because you see this 3,200. That means it has more than twice as much Magicka to start as a Grand Soul Gem. Now, it does take 2 Grand Soul Gems to recharge, but that's going to last long enough for you to kill all the NPCs you need to get to monsters. Or if it ever really doesn't, you'll be able to just use some summons, Soul Trap your summons, and recharge it. This is a convenience one, and let's say I pick 25 shock damage. You can just throw Shock 100%, Weakness, and Magic 100% Weakness on a spell that's very quick to quadruple that damage, and that's 100 bonus points of damage for 70 swings. It's also a lot cheaper than trying to combine all of the weaknesses like I was talking about with the Grand Soul Gem enchant. 25 shock damage or fire damage or frost damage is very good as just a damage enchant because it's very convenient and it just feels good. Water walking, we're going to say D. It's not totally worthless, but it's not good. Water walking just isn't that hard to get. Sea Stride is only an apprentice level spell. So Traven the Red Guard, he is in that one place with the well where you go into the well to get the ring. What is that, Shaden Hall? When you're doing the recommendation quest, Trayvon the Red Guard will be there. He's a destruction trainer, but he's like a really bad destruction trainer. He will sell Sea Stride. You only need 25 alteration to buy it. It only costs 39. It lets you walk on water for 30 seconds. That spell alone is enough for you to always walk on water. So you only need to get to 25 alteration, and then this is just a moot point. If you ever want to walk on water, you have it. And most of the time, you don't really care about that, so most of the time, it's kind of worthless. Also, this is kind of a good list for you to see. Sullenness here. This guy in Skingrad, he sells all those weakness spells I've been talking about, except Magicka, and Viggy is in the same building as Sullenness. Arlen Way's in the market districts. These two sell weakness to magic, but you need 50 skill for that. These are very useful skills or spells. Make sure you buy those. Or if you're a high elf, you'll already start with some of them. If you pick the apprentice sign, you'll already start with weakness to magic too. That was kind of an off-topic tangent. Back to this tier list. Night Eye, F. Light, F. I don't know about you, but I've literally never been able to not see in this game. Like, there's never once been a point where I've thought this dungeon is too dark, I would have any benefit from Light or Night Eye. And I don't know if my brightness is too high, but when I watch my own streams or I watch my own gameplay or videos, it doesn't look that way. In fact, it sometimes looks way too dark. So I almost want to turn my brightness up when I'm streaming, which would make these even less valuable. I just don't see the point. The game wasn't designed for these to be in it. They're cool concepts, and I would like for them to be valuable, but they are not. Functionally, they do nothing. They're completely worthless. Detect Life is a D. Pretty bad too. Yes, it's a high value, but you don't really need more than 100. The only time I've ever used Detect Life is for during that Fighters Guild quest when you have to kill all the trolls that have been making people disappear that the Will-O-Wisps have been leading away. I can't find the last troll, so I use Detect Life. That's one time in the entire game that I can think of that this has almost any value. Yes, it's useful for sneaking, but the times you need to sneak, you can just cast a Detect Life spell or wear something with the Detect Life enchantment, or wear the Grey Cowl if you've done the Thieves Guild, which has even more Detect Life. I don't really see that purpose. I don't really need to know where everyone is that far away. It's kind of nice, I guess. You could throw it on some ring and carry it around, but honestly, I'd be kind of annoyed with it in my inventory. Resist Element. This is 35 points. If Elemental Shield didn't exist, this should probably be A, but Elemental Shield does exist, so this is B. If you're at the armor cap without Elemental Shield, yes, this is better, I guess. So at very, 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 very end game, when you've capped out everything, and if you're using a shield, sure, you could use Resist Element, but honestly, Resist Magic is just better because you can get to 100% resist magic. You don't ever need to resist an element. 35%, however, is a lot, but there's also certain rings in the game, like this flame ring that you can find at level 20, and it just gives you 100% fire resist. I believe there is one for frost and shock as well. Here's one for frost. Frost ring, you can just find it. Resist shock, storm ring, you can just find it. 100%. So finding a sigil stone with 35%, it's just not the best one. And so it feels kind of stupid. Yes, these are limited to rings, but come on. For these poison and disease ones and paralysis, there's something called the Ring of Vitality, which just gives you 100% resistance to all of those. So all of those things are kind of worthless as well, because that ring's not that rare. And those things just aren't that big of a problem in the game, typically. So I think just the fact that those rings exist, I'm going to move Resist Element down to C, because something exists that's just 3 times better than the best Sigil Stone. And so it just makes it not that, and they're not that rare. Shock damage. Why do I have that? Frost damage? That's elemental damage. Those are the same thing. I think I just showed that to show. So this is fire damage. It's got 70 charges. They all have 70 charges, even though they have slightly different costs, because they just bump for shock damage, for example. It costs 48 instead of 46 per swing, but they bumped the total charge up a couple 140 or something to make it so they all have exactly 70 uses. Silence is like Damage Magicka, but better. So I'd put that as a D because very rarely do I need to silence people. This could be, you could argue it's a low C. I'll put it in C. It's not terrible. It's definitely better than Damage Magicka. It's just very niche. Very rarely do I ever need to silence an opponent in this game. And you could just use a spell. It would definitely be an off weapon. It wouldn't be your primary weapon. But yeah, it could have some use against a Zivili. They won't be able to summon a Clan Fear. That could help you. But chances are they've already summoned the Clan Fear. Resist Magic, well, that's A. Yes, you could be a Breton with a Mundane Ring, and you don't need anything like this. But you're not always there right away. So at level 17, you can start getting 20% resist magic. So this is definitely one I would not be save scumming. If I got this, just throw it on something. It is a big boost. Even if you're not a Breton, 20% magic resist is a lot. Obviously, that's 5 of them to be completely invulnerable to all magic in the game. This one is the only effect that actually makes you invulnerable. Reflect Spell and Spell Absorption do not give you immunity to all damage types. What Resist Magic does. Again, in terms of fun, I do try to cap it at 80% because it can just, the game can kind of end if you get too much resist magic and reflect damage and armor, but that's a story for another time. Next, we have Soul Trap. I don't know. That's not very good. It does have 75 uses, but Umbra has like 125. And Umbra is not that hard to get. You could put on a bow, I guess, but I'm not really seeing the point. Resist Disease, that's an F. You ever see Resist Disease, you get a save scum that. That's totally pointless. By level 17, which is when you would get 50% resist disease. The fact that it's not 100 is just an insult. You can eat a single mandrake root, a single ingredient, a clam fear claw, just eat it. and diseases are done. You don't even need potions, and you will have potions by this point in the game unless you're like purposely avoiding them for whatever reason. And you can get 50 at 50 restoration, you can just buy a cure disease spell, and disease is literally no longer a problem in any way whatsoever. It's just gone. And so this is just garbage, total waste of time. I would never care about resist disease. You see that, and it's combined with a bad enchant, you just reload. I think it's like absorb endurance and resist disease. This one combined, that's a reload for sure. You definitely deserve that. Last, we have 30% Chameleon. I don't like doing this because it can break the game. So instead of putting it S, I'm only going to put it at A. Because if you get to 100% Chameleon, you're going to get bored and uninstall the game. Like, I'm just telling you now, if you've never done it, sure, try it out. Just giggle around as like literally everyone in the game completely ignores you. But if you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just not entertaining. And this is a video game at the end of the day. And I know I talk about these tier lists as if, this is like how to min max and stuff, but really it's a lot more about having fun. Damage fatigue probably shouldn't be A, but it's really fun to just knock people down over and over again. And feather probably doesn't need to be this high up, but that's a lot of carry weight. That's a lot of carry weight, man. And so it's pretty nice. I think my tier lists really always are going to focus on what's best if you're playing kind of naturally. And when I say naturally, I don't mean like you're never using any of your meta knowledge, because I've played this. I know where the poison apples are. I know where extra gold is. I know where good equipment is. I know how to always get the mundane ring. I know what monster chest to loot to have a better chance at getting those special items. But I'm not going to stand there and attack Periite's guys for 2 hours to get my blade to 100. And so Fortify Blade does have value to me. I'm not going to sneak in the sewers for 3 hours and walk against a wall to get 100 sneak. I'm not going to do the security thing. I'm not going to do ridiculous, boring things that will invalidate some of these. Now, those things do exist. So some of these things are completely invalid if you're really, really going for the full min-max. Just know every tier list I've ever made, whether it's the race tier list, the birth sign, any of them, I'm not really including that stuff because the most important part to me is that I'm having a good time. I'm having a good experience building this powerful character and kind of role-playing into it and leaning into what they are. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching.